Morning ServiceNow coders. In this video I want to talk to you a little bit about technical best practice references. There's many references out there that are really super useful. The first thing I would say is if you have got ServiceNow running a health scan in your environment for you, it's well worth keeping a track of those health scan recommendations. So for example, they've reported some business rule best practice within their health scan. Why not write that down somewhere and keep a running document of all of the items that they've reported on? So that could translate to a document that lives within your company wiki that you could periodically update. You can then use that as a basis of your onboarding process for new developers joining the team. So many of the items that will show up in a health scan are useful points of reference. So it's one thing fixing the health scan, but later you can, as I have done, you can perhaps forget to what that item was and reintroduce the problem. For example, a hard-coded sysid and a script include or something like that. Whereas if you've actually recorded that you fixed that item, you've kept a record of it somewhere, you can refer to that frequently and then avoid repeating the mistake again in the future. So in terms of health scans, it's always a good idea if you can to request that ServiceNow run that scan perhaps in your UAT environment each time you have a code drop there, so that you can actually identify and rectify the issues before they even hit your production environment. And of course, always good to be running them on production directly as well. In my blog, you can search on the health scan topic. I will put a link in the description below. You can also search on best practice. Now, just bear in mind that some of these articles in here may be a little bit out of date. We'll be trying to update them as time goes on, some of the older ones. But let me just point you to a few articles that exist within the ServiceNow space that will help you with technical best practice. So if you go into the developer site and you search on technical best practices, this will pull up a list of dedicated pages that are really super helpful. So there's one around scripting, there's one around client-side scripting, one around business rules, all kinds of pitfalls that you can fall into with business rules if you're not careful. Debugging best practice, logs and queues best practice, update set usage, XML data transfer technical best practices. So yeah, you can also obviously within the developer site, within the community, within the ServiceNow pages that you normally visit, just search for that topic of best practice and see what that comes up with, and you can drill into the various items that come back here. This KBA is also quite useful. It's a governance technical best practices ebook provided by ServiceNow. It goes into all aspects of coding best practice. It's well worth sort of reading through this for your JavaScript best practice, and you can even export this page as a PDF and share it within your organization as well. This page here is a tips for writing integrations, which is super useful, and I'll put all the links in the description below. Data preservation and cloning, always good to have a process for cloning, because when you clone over your subprod, you can wipe out useful data. For example, it might be good to have a process for quickly restoring test users, either by excluding those on a clone or by having an XML that perhaps you can some XMLs that you can pull back into your instance very quickly to re-establish those UAT test users. And then what I wanted to do is just show you one example of a best practice, and I'll give you the link to the recommendation from ServiceNow in the description below. Basically what they're saying is that you should use GlideAggregate rather than getRowCount, or you shouldn't be using getRowCount normally, because it doesn't comply with best practice, even though it's a method provided by ServiceNow. So the link will explain why. This article in my blog looks at a good example and a bad example of getRowCount. So what's it saying here? Using glide record to count rows can cause scalability issues as tables grow over time. By the way, this may well be one of the items that gets reported in your health scan, for example. Because it retrieves every record with the query and then counts them, gets its result. GlideAggregate gets its result from built-in database functionality, which is much quicker and doesn't suffer from the scalability issues that glide record does. So what's this bad one versus the good one? Have a look anyway, see what you think. But I wanted to show you this in action. So in this background script here, I'm going to do a comparison of the getRowCount versus a GlideAggregate, and I'll point you to the code for this in the description below. So if you use getRowCount, that's ServiceNow recommending that you don't use that. It will work, but it might not be performant if or best practice if this is a routine that you're going to be using repeatedly. Might be better to actually use GlideAggregate. So here what we're doing is we're actually passing a glide record to a GlideAggregate and doing a count and returning the count that way. So for getRowCount we got 13 returned for instance created on this year, matching a certain state. And so if I repeat that now with the GlideAggregate, getting the same result, so it is working and is more performant. Again, this is just an example of a best practice item, and I'll post the link to the article in the description below. Well, happy coding guys, cheers for listening, ciao for now, and take care, bye.